Hey there, welcome back. So far in this series, we've been working with HTML by itself in an HTML file, and we've been working with JavaScript here in our Run.js environment. But now it's time to combine those together and see what we can do with HTML and JavaScript in a single web page. Let's go. Okay, so where we left off last time is we have this JavaScript written. We have an li function which takes an input of text and wraps it in an li HTML tag. We have an array of tasks. Here we have 5 strings. And then we're calling tasks.map, which will call this function, the li function, once for every single item in the array. That will return a new array. And then we're using join with an empty string to join them all together, all in this single line of HTML. This is great, but we're not really in a web page here. We can't do much with this HTML. So let's combine these powers and see what we can do. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go to my desktop here and create a project folder where we can save some of our source files. You may want to do this in your documents folder or somewhere where you can keep it long term. So I'm just going to create a new folder on my desktop here, and I'm going to call it tasks. Then I want to open this folder in VS Code. There are a couple different ways you can do that. You can go to File, Open, and then select the folder and say Open. And then, or at least on a Mac, you can just drag this folder down to the VS Code icon, and that will open it here as well. I'm going to close this Welcome tab. Now we don't have anything in here yet, but we can see this tasks indicator up here. That means we're within a project. It just happens to be empty right now. So I'm going to add 2 files to this project. I'm going to click on this little add file icon up here, and I'm going to say index.html, and then I'm going to add another file called index.js, and that will house our JavaScript. So within this one folder, if I open it up here, you can see that I have both the HTML and our JavaScript files. If I go to our index.html file here, I'm going to take the HTML that we generated here in Run.js, copy that, and paste it into our HTML file. I'll then save that with Command or Control S, and then within our folder, I'm going to just double click on this so I can open it in the browser. Now let me arrange my windows here so we can see everything. And we can see that we have our 5 tasks, just like we would have expected with our 5 li tags in HTML. Now this is great and all, but one interesting thing about HTML is that it's really a living document. Let me show you what I mean by that. Our HTML in here, I'm just going to go ahead and space these out on various lines. Our HTML in here is set to have these 5 li tags. And if I go in here, I have my 5 bullets. But let me do something. Let me right click on this, hit inspect, and we can see our 5 li tags right here. This tree view within our elements tab here, by the way, this whole thing on the right, you may see it on the bottom, it's the same thing. This whole thing is called the inspector, and you'll be using this very frequently as a developer. I can see my 5 li tags in here, and I can click on one and try hitting delete. You can actually edit this HTML live here in the inspector. I can even open one up here. I'm going to double click on this text and say learn how to use inspector. And we can see that it's updated here. This HTML file that we're generating here on the left-hand side is really just the starting HTML for this web page. It loads up this structure into what's called the DOM. That's the document object model of this web page. And the DOM is very dynamic, and we can add and remove things to the DOM or to the page using JavaScript. So that's what we'll do here. Let's go ahead and actually erase all of our HTML, and we're going to start fresh. And we're going to start fresh with a brand new tag that we'll learn called the div tag. The div tag is probably the most popular tag in HTML. It's just a generic container tag to contain some content. So I'm going to, just as all other tags, open this up with an angle bracket, close it with an angle bracket, and we can see that thanks to VS Code, it's automatically added the closing tag here as well. So I've added this empty container. There's nothing on the page. If I save this and then refresh my browser, we can see that it's totally empty. It is here in the page, but it's empty. I'm also going to go in here, and before the closing angle bracket on the opening tag, I've added a space after div, and I'm going to add an attribute to this tag. This attribute is called ID. Then I'm going to use an equal sign and double quotes in HTML to add an ID to this tag. And I'm going to call this screen. Now, what this allows us to do is ID is a way for us to reference this particular div within the page. I could actually have several divs on this page and enter in different IDs to reference various areas of my page. But let me just go back to our one screen. Now, what's the point of this? The point of this is I'm creating an empty container here. I'm attaching the ID of screen so that we can get an initial container on our HTML page. Then we're going to use JavaScript to fill that container with HTML on the fly. Let's add one more tag, another new tag, and that is called the script tag. We'll add this at the very bottom. Script allows us to reference a JavaScript file. So I'm going to do script space and then add the attribute source, abbreviated as src. Then the equal sign and double quotes. And I'm going to reference this index.js file that we created earlier. Then I will close off this tag, and thanks VS Code for adding a closing tag for me. Now that's it. That is actually going to be all of the HTML in the HTML file for this episode. Everything else we're going to do in JavaScript. Let's verify that we're actually including this JavaScript file on the page by doing something special. So let's go to our index.js file. It's empty right now. And I can do something called console.log. So we have this special variable called console and a log function on it, which we can call with almost anything. So I'm going to say hello world. Just add a hello world string in here. Then I'm going to hit save. If I go over here and refresh my page, I can see that our div tag is in here with our ID. Our script tag is in here. And then if I go to the console tab, there we go. I have outputted something to this console using hello world. So we have verified that our HTML page is including our JavaScript file. Now let's really kick things into gear and have some fun. So let's go to that run.js script that we had before. And I'm going to copy all of this and paste it in my index.js JavaScript file. Now my screen is a little bit small here. There's this, weird thing on the right on VS Code, which allows you to see your very long source file all at once, but I actually don't want this taking up room. So I'm going to do Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P on Windows. And this brings up a very quick command palette for VS Code. And this thing on the right is called the minimap, and I just kind of want to hide that. So if we search for minimap, then I can toggle that and that will go away. That's just kind of a little aside. So once again, we've copied in our JavaScript here. If I save this and refresh, nothing happens here because I haven't done anything with this output. What I want to do is I want to take this output and I want to place the HTML that generates inside of this div dynamically. How we can do that is I'm going to set this output, which remember, this generates an HTML string. So I'm just going to set this to a variable called HTML. So I'll do const to make a variable. I'm going to call it HTML and then assign it using the equal sign. Now we have this variable HTML with an HTML string. So how do we get that inside of our div here? Well, there are a couple of different functions in JavaScript that we can use. So let me go down a little further, and I'm going to create another variable called screen. So I've done const screen equals, and screen I want to set equal to this element on the page, this div element on the page. The way we can do that is there's another special variable called document. And document is something we always have access to when we're inside of a web page. There is a function on document called getElementById. And if you remember, we did add an ID to this element called screen. So this is a function, you call it with parentheses, and I'm going to pass to it the ID of that div, which is screen. So now this screen variable references this HTML element. So how do we put HTML inside of it? Well, if we go below here on screen, there is a property called inner HTML. And the capitalization is important here. So inner is all lowercase and HTML is all uppercase. I can then set that property equal to HTML. So we've done a lot of typing here and haven't seen much so far. So let's save and refresh and see what happened. Boom, there we go. So if we review this real fast, our HTML file, which I'm going to place top and bottom here. Our HTML file has this empty div. There's no content here. But when we've refreshed the page, there actually is content on the screen. And down in our inspector, I can see this div, and inside of it, there are 5 li tags, even though that wasn't in our HTML file. Those 5 li tags are being generated by JavaScript, the same code that we used in the last episode. And then by referencing that screen div that we created and setting its inner HTML, we have dynamically injected new DOM, new HTML, onto this page. Let's do one more thing before we leave it here for this episode. And let's add that line that we had in the very first episode of how many tasks we have in this list. And we'll count this dynamically by seeing how many items are in our array of tasks. So if this is our HTML here, and our HTML in JavaScript is just a big long string, then this HTML that is generating the list of tasks, I can just concatenate that to another string. So I'm going to add to the beginning of this HTML, you have X number of tasks, colon. If I save that and refresh, I now have this line at the top, you have X tasks. So let's put the number in there. So I'm going to go ahead and split this string up again. So I have split this into one string with you have space, plus to concatenate. And then if you remember, we can use our tasks.length property to count the number of items in this tasks array, concatenate that to space task colon, and concatenate that to our mapped and joined list of li tags. So let me save that, refresh, and now it says you have 5 tasks. So if I go in here and let's say I remove a task, let me say I remove this 5th task. I don't update any other code. If I save and refresh this, now it's updated to you have 4 tasks with our 4 li tags here. So you have just for the first time combined HTML and JavaScript using it in a web page. You have set up some initial HTML to load on screen, and then with this JavaScript source file, you have dynamically from an array of tasks generated the required HTML to list those tasks and pushed it to the screen. I hope this gives you a sense of the power of HTML and JavaScript together. And you could imagine what we could do with this as we continue to learn by dynamically inserting and removing things on this page, changing things on this page, and really creating an interactive experience. Quick thing before we go. We actually have a major bug on this page. And in fact, it could lead to a security issue if used in production. Let me give you an idea of what that is, and we'll learn how to solve it next time. Right now, we are just using string concatenation to build up our HTML in JavaScript. But what happens if I had a task that was called learn the li tag? Let me go ahead and make that now. Learn the li tag. And I wanted to display li on the screen as text. Let me save this and refresh it. And ooh, we have an issue here. We only have 4 strings in this array. I didn't add a 5th item. And in fact, it says you have 4 tasks. But I have 5 bullets, and it says learn the, and then nothing, tag. What's happened is it's interpreting this li as HTML because so far we've been using strings as HTML. What could happen here is if we were allowing user input on this page, users could input other JavaScript files and call a bunch of stuff that we don't want them to. So this could actually be a big security hole. In the next episode, we'll learn about encoding strings and making them safe to display on the screen. So I'll see you there.